Cool. So before we go on and talk about conditionals, I want to notice one thing. So it's like living your life is like writing a program. Sometimes you will be in a situation or there are different circumstances that will apply, and depending on those, you're going to make a decision, and this decision will impact how your life will evolve, of what is going to happen next. And the same thing is happening in JS when you write your conditions or when you write your conditional statements. So basically, you have to predict situations or certain conditions where they're in what's going to happen if they are satisfied, or what's going to happen if they are not satisfied. Let's have a look at our basic if statement, how we build it. So first of all, we have that if keyword, and in the parentheses, we're going to put our condition. So if this condition is satisfied, meaning if it is evaluated by the program, because it's going to convert whatever we're going to put as a condition, it's going to be evaluated and converted to a logical value. So whether it's true or false. If it's true, the block of code that we're going to put between those curly braces is going to be executed. If, however, our condition is false, so the condition is not satisfied, it's never gonna enter this block of code. This instruction here will never be executed, and it's just gonna find a cursor on the line 12. So it's gonna exit and move on with its life, meaning we'll run the rest of the code. Here I've created a condition that is pretty ridiculous, but it's only for the purposes of this presentation. So my condition doesn't say anything for here. For now, I've just put number 9. And because number 9 evaluates to true, the condition has been satisfied, and we can see the text message in the console. Console log is happening. The condition is true, and the block of code is executed. So this instruction is executed because this condition has been evaluated to be true. If I change it and I put 0, 0 is a false value, so my condition hasn't been met, it's been evaluated to false, and the block of code between the curly braces is skipped altogether. If the condition is false, the program moves on, executing the rest of the code. But you cannot see the console log anymore because the condition was false. If I go back and set it to true, you can again see the text message. You can put more than just one instruction. So if you want more things to happen, if the condition is true, it's okay. You can put an alert, for instance, but yay, it works. So you can see that there is a console message here, and also a pop-up window that says, yay, it works. It's okay. Just as a curiosity, I'm gonna add that if you put an alert on the top, it's gonna stop the rest of the code. So let's save it, and then we first see the pop-up window, and only after I've clicked OK, the rest of the code is executed. So you can now see the message. It's just a curiosity, just something for you to know. Not that important for today's tutorial. So let's comment this out so we don't see it for the rest of our tutorial. And let's move on to the next example. Here I've got another if statement. So again, I've got that keyword if, our condition that is username, and between the curly braces, there is a console log that says hello, whatever the username is, and an exclamation mark. Save it, and you can see hello Ella printed in the console. If this was an empty string, the value would be evaluated to false, so the condition wouldn't be met, and there is no longer that console log showing. Empty string evaluates to false, always. If we put anything on here, like look, for instance, we have hello look. One more thing, when we concatenate strings with variables, bear in mind that the empty space here won't be added by the program, so we have to do it ourselves. If I left it like this, it will be hello look, but all together. So we have to think for the program. The program won't add anything from itself. Right. If this first example isn't exactly clear, why username would evaluate to true or false, you can put down the whole thing. So our intention is that the username gives his or her name. So if the user didn't provide his or her name, so leaving an empty string, we don't want to print out hello. So username different from an empty string. And this is exactly the same thing as here in here. We are asking for not an empty string. Once it's not an empty string, the condition will be satisfied. And also bear in mind that, so now both instructions have been executed, and we can see on the screen hello look twice. And it's because even though it's the same instruction, or the instruction does the same thing, this is a separate instruction. So the program will go reading from the top to the bottom and sees the instruction and will execute it. And later on, we'll execute the next instruction. So both if statements are treated as completely separate entities and will be executed. The program will never question your choices. So you can do the same thing like 10 times, put the same if statement, and all of them will be executed. So it's not like, okay, I'm verifying here if the username has given his name, so I don't have to do this. No, both will be executed. Well, both will be treated equally by the program. Let's comment this out as well, so it doesn't bother our eyes when we do the next example. So for now, we just verified one condition and gave one instruction in case this condition is true, but there are more options. So in case we want to do something else, in case the condition hasn't been satisfied, we have an if-else statement. So an if is executed if the condition has been true, and if the condition hasn't been true, then this block of code will be entered, and the program will execute the second instruction. Here I've created a little bit more complicated condition. So a person wants to go to concert, and the condition is that this person has a ticket and is at least 16 years old, marked here by the logical AND. We now know that if the logical AND is used, both conditions have to be true for the entire statement to be true. So this has to be true, or give us an option that only one thing has to be true, either this together or boss family. Boss family, you know that relatives of the boss. There are different rules applying to them. So they don't need to have the ticket or be at least 16 in order to enter the concert arena. Cool. The order of the execution is that and here takes the priority. So that's why these two go together. These will be evaluated separately, and this will be evaluated separately, and this one will be evaluated first. And only one of those, either this together or this, has to be true, because logical OR works this way, that only one condition has to be true in order for the entire statement to be true. So here I've created, let's change this to true, and let's check what's going to happen. Okay, so now the first and the second one is true. So this one evaluates to true. This one is false, but it's okay because only one thing has to be true in order for the entire statement to be true. So the condition has been met. And so the person can enter. If we change this to true and these to false, this person can still enter, because it doesn't matter if this person has a ticket or is of an appropriate age. It's boss's relative. So this person can enter and enjoy the concert. Let's say none of the conditions have been met. The program will check the conditions. You can see these haven't been satisfied, so the condition is false. It's going to skip this instruction and go to our else. Because this says that in every other case, do this. So I'm sorry you cannot get in, is the message that you can see on the screen. This instruction will be executed once this condition hasn't been met. So here we have a little bit more options. Because previously we only had examples where you had instructions as to what to do if the condition is true. Here we have another option in case the condition hasn't been true, and you have to do this. Whatever is after the else, this block of code between those other curly braces will be executed. Let's comment this out. Else if clause. Cool. So sometimes we will have slightly more complex code or more complex conditions to be satisfied, or different scenarios. So for instance, here the program wants to inform the user at what kind of stage of life this person is. So if this person's age is less or equal to 9, then it's going to print out the message, you're still a child. If another case scenario, age is less than 9 and is less or equal to 18, so it's its age is higher than 9, greater than 9, so it's between 9 and 18, the console log message will say you are young. The next statement or the condition is, if you're older than 18 and the age is less or equal to 70, the console log message will say the world is your oyster. And the last one, possible age, in this program, if you're older than 70, then console log message will say you're a mature person and you appreciate the advantages of this age. So here is an example of how you could possibly build your instructions, but you should definitely avoid this way, because this is like every if statement is separate. So this one is separate, this one is separate, this one is separate. And even though it consists of all the options that person writing it wanted to include, it's a right way of doing it, because every time all of those if statements will be checked. And there is a better way of doing this, which will make the code harder to confuse. And this is the other code block. If you have a look, it does exactly the same thing, but it's using another construct, else if. So if you have more conditions or possibilities or options, it's best to use this first if, and then another case, else if, and then at the end, another else in every other case. So it's including exactly the same options, the same age span, but it's written in a clearer, neater, and easier to read way. Even though it's going to do the same thing, but it's more optimal. And this is the right way of writing the same thing down in the correct programming world. So here, the first condition is age less or equal 9. And this is exactly the same as in here. But the else if, the second one, will only include if the age is less or equal to 18. So we no longer need to check if it's greater than 9 and less or equal to 18, because the instructions or the lines of code will be read from the top to the bottom. So the program will firstly check if this condition is true. And if it's not true, this eliminates this option altogether. So later on, it can check just whether the age is less or equal to 18, and it no longer needs to include both options, because this one is eliminated at this point. If this is not true, the instructions in the curly braces are skipped, and the program moves on and checks the next condition. And this is whether the age is less or equal to 18. If this condition isn't true, it moves on to the next else if. You can write it down line below, but normally it's on the same line as the other curly brace. And so, as you can see, the condition is now less complicated, and it introduces like this neater way and easier to read, because every other condition eliminates those options. The program checked this, moves on checking the next condition, later on checking the next condition, and if the person is in none of those age groups, then it goes on and is executing whatever left. So if somebody is not between 0 to 9, 9 to 18, and this person has to be older than 70, so it's going to print out the last condition or the instruction in the last curly braces, meaning you're a mature person and you appreciate the advantages of this age. So here, much neater way of putting all the if statements separately. So as you can see, it's going to print out the same thing, but I can assure that this is much more optimized code, and we want to make things easier and not more complicated. We could make it a little bit better yet. So let's change the age let's just check if it works. So if, for instance, if I put 3, you're still a child. So both work exactly the same way, as you can see. It's just this one is better, and you gotta trust me. If I put 69, the world is your oyster. Cool. But what if the person puts no? No is not an option, and it's still printing you're still a child. So we could prevent from this malfunctioning of our program and, for instance, put another condition and type of age equals in strings, because the type of always returns a string value, and we ask for a number. So as you can see now, it's printing different thing because this condition hasn't been satisfied. It's going to print out console log you're young because we didn't include the second part of the condition in the other conditions. So let's fix that. And let's check if it works now. So here, now the second set of instructions is printing you're a mature person and you appreciate the advantage of this age. Or we can add, or I cannot determine your age. Let's comment this out altogether because this is not the right way of putting things. So here somebody put incorrect value because we're not expecting no, which will still be evaluated if we don't make our code secure. So we now kind of preventing this kind of situation where somebody put a value that we're not expecting and the code is now expecting for age to be a number. And so it goes to the last condition, and the last condition says I cannot determine your age. So this could be optimized in a much better way, but for now let's just focus on how we build conditions, and later on we will elaborate on this and you're gonna see a much better way of putting things. For now, let's just focus on the basics. So I'm gonna comment this out and present one more thing, because it's very common that there will be more than one if, and it's going to be nested in the other if. So the first condition here is that the guest name is given, so it's different from an empty string. And if this condition has been satisfied, this set of instructions will be entered. If this is an empty string, this whole block code will be skipped and the else will be entered. So if this hasn't been satisfied and somebody hasn't given his name, the console log I don't know your name, so you won't enter, will be printed out to the console. If we put back check, so it's gonna first check the first condition. The first condition is true, so it evaluates to true. It has been satisfied, so the rest of the block inside can be entered. And there is another if. If and I want the age of the guest be greater than 18. It has to be an adult to enter the club. If this has been satisfied, and it has been because Chag is 30, it's going to print out welcome to the club, last guest name. If Chag lies and he's actually 17. He's 17, he wants to get in, he's given his name, and unfortunately he is too young, so the first if has been satisfied, this condition has been satisfied, the name has been given, and it goes on to read the next condition. Guest age more or less than 18. This hasn't been satisfied because Chag is 17 and we need it to be more than 18. And I've got no space in here, so meaning I need to add it here. Nice. So the second part will be entered here, and this else will be executed. First condition checked. The second condition hasn't been satisfied, so the else from here is going to be executed. So this is something you're going to see very often. One if, checking one for one thing. If it's okay, then going on and checking another thing, and giving more possibilities, more options on how to act or what instructions to execute. If there is an empty string, this condition hasn't been satisfied, the code here will be skipped altogether, and only this last else will be entered. The program will enter the instruction from here and execute. I don't know your name, so you won't enter. Cool. Another way of putting conditional statement is to use a switch statement, and a switch statement has like a stiff construction that it has to be memorized. So all this you can see in here, switch, curly braces, whatever, the parentheses, case break, colon, it all has to be exactly as in the example. So it either has to be memorized, or you have to remember when to use it, and then whenever you're gonna need it, then you will have to Google it. And I'm sure that after a few times you're gonna write your own switch statement, it will just become something that you can do without picking. So first things first, we have, instead of an if keyword, we have a switch keyword. In the parentheses is our argument, something we're gonna check. We open the block of code with the curly braces, the same as with an if statement, and when we check our specific cases. So there is a keyword case, the case we're checking, colon, after colon, the instruction that we want to execute, and then the keyword break. There are more cases, so we've got case Monday, case Tuesday, case Wednesday. And at the end, a default. Default works as an else. So if none of the above worked, then execute the instruction that is in the default. Switch statement works very well if we have a specific case as like a specific word. Like for instance, here we have days of the week that we're looking for, so we know the limited number of those cases, and we can print out very specific message for a specific case. In that case, in our case, we have Wednesday. So once it's gonna get to case Wednesday, it's gonna console log message today is Wednesday, as you can see in the console, and then the keyword break is to break the code and go no further. So for instance, if we remove that break from here, the code would find the case Wednesday, execute what we instructed the program to do, and then go on and also print out the next instruction. No idea what it is today. So sometimes this is what we want to achieve, but most of the times this is not what we want to happen. So just remember that break word here is kind of important. And also, if we wanted to use a different case, for instance, it doesn't need to be a string. It can be a different data type. If this was our case, number 1, then it would stop at this case here, 1, because it's matching. Let's go back to what it was, meaning Wednesday. And just please have a look how it's constructed. Got a switch, then in the parentheses, the argument, so the word or data that is going to be compared to what we receive. Break word, remember, because we want to finish checking the cases, so that's where it's going to stop. And default is to what to do if none of the options are matching what we're looking for. This break here is actually not needed because this is the end of the code and it's not going to do anything, but just to kind of make it neat and easy to read, we put that at the end because it's a nice construction, but you don't need that last break here. So sometimes this can be a more transparent way of putting a conditional statement and we're remembering. Let's comment this out. And let's move on to our very important conditional operator. And we already mentioned some things about. It's very neat and it's very nice to use and also very common. Something that we're gonna use a lot at work. So here is a basic construction. That's how you build a ternary operator. So we have a condition. If this is true, if A is true, question mark, do the first instruction. If A is false, colon, do C, do the last instruction. So B is in case the condition is true, and C is in case the condition hasn't been satisfied. And in the human language, same here. I've got condition. If it's true, if it's satisfied, the condition has been met, question mark, execute this piece of code. If it hasn't been true, execute this piece of code. So the first one is if the condition has been true, and the second piece is if the condition was false. And here I've got an example. So I've created a variable score, and my ternary operator is here. So I'm checking. This is like something abstract, but it's a good piece of code to present how the ternary operator works. So I'm comparing here two values. 20 is a number and 20 is as a string. And this is also for revision purposes. So a triple equal mark means that I'm checking both type and value, and the conversion is not possible. So this has not been satisfied. A logical AND, meaning both parts. We could put those in the parentheses to make it easy to read, but we don't have to. So there's a logical AND, so both parts of the condition have to be true in order for the entire statement to be true. So we now know that this is not true because this is not the same thing. Score is true because there is a value provided. So this would evaluate to true, but this would evaluate to false, and since true and false gives false, then the first part, so the first console log up here should be executed. Right? There is a colon in case, this is false, so the second thing should be executed. Since the entire statement was evaluated to false, so the second condition should be executed. And so let's check. Type error 100 is not a function. I'm getting an error because I forgot a semicolon. So my Beautify is formatting the code for me. Let's save it again, and this should be okay now. So as you can see, errors happen, and whenever there is an error thrown in the console, you have to read it and just inspect your code and fix it. Do not get worried, do not get scared, just read what all this mess about and let's fix it. It's actually a good thing it happened. So that you could see that I'm also making mistakes. So here, got this instruction because the condition is not true. So if, for instance, I remove this one equal mark, so now this value and this value should be evaluated true because the conversion happened. So this is seen by the interpreter as the same thing. So this is true. Logical AND, score is true. Now the first instruction should be executed. Let's save it. And as expected, this instruction if true condition. So the first console log is printed in the console. Let's comment this out. Let's uncomment the second example. So for instance, we can check if the score is greater than 120. And if it is, then console log true. If it isn't true, go to the second console log, false. It's gonna print out false since our score is set to 100. 100 is not greater than 120, so it's going to the second part of the instruction. If we change our score to 150, the condition has been satisfied now. So score is greater than 120, hence console logging now true. Remember that you cannot capture a value from a conditional statement and assign it to a variable. So in certain situations, we want to do this, and when it's not possible, we have those other instructions that will help us. The conditional operator returns the value and is often used when we want to assign the result to a result of an operation to a variable. So here I've got a nice example. And console log this. Let's format to the format that we want. Save it. So console log. Here I've got, again, a ternary operator. So I've got a condition. If 1 is greater than 10, print out 1. If it isn't, print out 0. And so if I want to assign a value, I can use a ternary operator. Let's say I've got a variable called killed monsters because I'm playing a game. At the moment, I've given it a value of 9. And then, assuming you understand the ternary operator, you know that now, whatever is the result, I can assign the right score to the variable I've created. So I've created a score, and right away I'm assigning a value to it. So in a dynamic way. So here, killed monsters greater than 10, give me 1 point. If killed monsters are not greater than 10, give me 0 points. Syntax error. Identifier score has already been declared. 129. Where am I declaring score? Oh, here. Right, so in the line 117, I've already declared 1 score. So let's comment this out. Command F will find any word that you're looking for. Here I checked the line 129, but I wasn't sure where else I declared a score. So Command F, and I found score. I found the reason why there was an error. Let's save it again. And now console log score, and it's 0. So if I changed the number of killed monsters to 16, it's changed to 1 because of this condition here. I've got killed monsters greater than 10. If true, print out 1, so give me 1 point. If not, 0. And then I'm console logging score because I've assigned the result of this to a new variable that I called score. Let's comment this out. And let's have a look at the last example. I've created a variable called player name, and I gave it the name of revenge. And now there is a use of backticks. So you finally can see the magic of how it works, how you can inject piece of code without using the concatenation, so the pluses. So here I've got backticks. Construction of using variable names, and these can be injected right dynamically into the code, or like for instance here I'm console logging something, so the text and the variable names, and I'm using here those variable to check whether the condition is true. Let's analyze what is happening here, and then I'll explain why there is a $sign. So I've got player name. If player name is true, so we know that we are expecting not an empty string. If it's true, so it's not an empty string, please print out player name. If it's not true, meaning there is an empty string, print out stranger warrior. So we've got text, hello, and depending on whether the player name would be an empty string or not, so if the condition is satisfied or not, then it would be printed out either a real name given or a stranger warrior. I'm gonna save it, and as you can see, there is a hello revenge printed out in the console, meaning that the string was not empty. If I make it an empty string, so the condition is no longer satisfied, so the player name is an empty string, meaning it's a falsy value, it won't go to the first instruction, it will go to the second instruction. It might seem like a little complicated at the moment because of the $sign and injecting variables into a text. But basically what we're doing here is that we are using a $sign, the curly braces, and inside here we can put the name of the variable right away using backticks. We can inject this as a text rather than putting strings something something plus and something something here. So ternary operator, very useful if you want to dynamically inject while checking conditions. If something isn't clear, I would definitely encourage you before you move on to the next tutorial, which will be let's check what's gonna be next. Next we'll have array, intro to array. So before if there is anything that isn't clear, I think you should definitely download the file and practice it before moving on to the next tutorial on the intro to arrays. Let's just practice this. The construction with backticks, we're gonna still practice some more in the exercises. But for now, I would like you to understand the ternary operator and how it works, the structure of it. So there is a condition, question mark, option if the condition is true, and the instruction if the condition is false.